Joe Tripodi.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that welcome. I have to bring my favorite beverage here. Hopefully you folks in the back can see. If you can't, there's plenty of orchestra seating up here for you. It's a tough room to work, but I'll try to get through this. Very pleased to be here. Wonderful to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Really appreciate the opportunity, first of all, to thank everybody for what you guys do. Obviously, I spend in my life a little time in airports, and so I know how all the challenges that you face, but I also know how the experience has changed and evolved and gotten so much better over the years. That can never overcome a 12-hour flight delay, but it is what it is. You know, those things happen. 95% of the time, it's great. So I think what I want to talk to you today about is some of the things that we're learning, and it's constant learning at the Coca-Cola Company. But first, I wanted to say that, you know, a couple months ago, I gave a speech in Las Vegas. You gotta bear with me, guys, because there'll be a little humor in here. Hopefully, you're awake enough to have it. And I was giving this huge presentation in Vegas, and the two speakers before me, you know, they gave great speeches, but there was no reaction. And I said, what's going on? So flying back, I said, you know what? I think there were the 4 states of engagement with the audience in Vegas. They were either zombies, they were either totally hungover, and I know that none of you probably even had a beer last night at the game. They were in awe. They were in awe of my speech, and that's why they were speechless, just like Ellen DeGeneres is of Katy Perry's necklace there. Or they were in over their head. My favorite show, Pawn Stars, not porn stars, Pawn Stars, with Chumley, who's basically a moron. So I know, though, that this audience will be far more engaged and enlightened and attentive. What I really want to talk to you very briefly, let me talk to you about a little bit about the Coca-Cola Company, because you got to hear a little bit about our company before we get into all the challenges. First of all, Coke, you know, 127 years old, just a few weeks ago. We started in one country, though, the U.S. Now we're in 207 countries. And we're not just in the country. We are on the ground operating. We don't just ship product in. We are very much manufacturing. We've got 1,010 manufacturing plants. We just opened one. It was just announced today in Miramar. You know, well, we're manufacturing in that country. We started with one brand. Great. You know, Coca-Cola, it's worth a lot of money. But now we've got 500-plus brands. 500-plus brands. That creates a lot of complexity, makes my life a little more challenging. I would tell you, I don't sit around worrying about brand 499. You know, I'm worrying about the top 20 that drive probably 90% of the economic value of the company. It was served one at a time. It was a small pharmacy here in Atlanta, Jacobs Pharmacy. They started one at a time serving, and now we have the world's largest distribution system. In fact, the largest distribution system ever created by any company in the world. It's an amazing, you know, with 300 bottlers, 20 million customers that we call on a regular basis, 13 million pieces of equipment, coolers, trucks, etc., all those things. Value of the brand, in 1899, Asa Candler sold the rights to sell Coca-Cola in the U.S. for $1. I wish we had been there at that time, right? Pretty good investment. And actually, the amazing thing is those rights were sold in perpetuity. So in perpetuity is a very long time, which is why if you're a bottler of the Coca-Cola Company, you probably have a lot of zeros in your bank account. You know, now, of course, Interbrand values our brand, just the Coca-Cola brand, at $77.8 billion. And we've been the #1 most valuable brand in the world for basically the last 13 years. Every time that study comes out, call my wife, say, I haven't screwed it up yet. We're still #1. Now, the only problem is, you know, the #2 brand recently, last year, was a company called Apple. And we grew at 8%, and Apple was growing at 125%. So I'm already laying the foundation to my boss and saying, we may not be the #1 brand forever. But all good things come to an end, but we're very proud to have that ranking. We've gone from a trickle. I know this is a very globally sophisticated audience because all of you will know that's the most famous statue in Belgium, Mannequin Peace. Many of you have been to Brussels, have seen that statue. So we went from a trickle where we were maybe 9 servings a day to now 1.8 billion servings a day. 1.8 billion, so that's like 1,600,000 servings a minute. So we're serving a lot of 8-ounce beverages. And that's total worldwide. Coke is about $1 billion, 1.1 billion. This was our logo then, when we started the company. This is our logo now. This is something to be said for consistency, not only consistency of identity, but consistency of what you stand for as a brand and as a company. There is value, great value to that. And so what we've thought about over the years and what has gotten us here, though, because I think what we all recognize is the forces of change and disruption are unparalleled. And so what we say is, we set out our BHAG. Our BHAG is our big, hairy, audacious goal, right? And our BHAG was we were going to double our business from 2010 to 2020. Double our business in a decade would have took 125 years for the company to do. I said, my God, how are you going to do that? You're crazy. You can't do that. Actually, when you do the math, it's actually only about a 4.7% compounded annual growth to do that. But as I remind my boss, the chairman and CEO, we're in the law of large numbers now. You're at 27.5 billion cases sold a year. And each of the last 3 years, we have added 1.2 billion cases. That's a lot. It's the law of large numbers that make it a little tougher to grow at 3, 4, 5% a year. That's the world we live in, particularly in a world that's driven by so much change. And it's a world that's also driven by tremendous contrasts. Because effectively, you have to live in two different spaces. Let me highlight this. Who's the bad guy here? Now, who would say that the person on the left is not the universal icon of happiness? Everyone in this audience says, of course he's not. He's the head of Iran, he's a bad guy, blah, blah, blah. There's the Dalai Lama, he's the great guy. If I gave this presentation in China, I would get a very different audience reaction. So my point is, you've got to be very conscious of looking through everything in the world through a Western prism. And that you have to understand what the beliefs, the history, the kind of cultural essence and the distinctions that make up each culture. Very different. Now, I do believe the guy on the right is the icon of happiness, but that's through my eyes. But we're also living in other contrasts where we got to do two things. We've got to grow this. We've got to have soaring growth, as I just referenced, but we have to do it in a sustainable way. The days of scorched earth growth for big companies, that is over. With the level of transparency you have now, with everybody looking at everything, with the involvement of NGOs around the world, you cannot do things that are going to in any way compromise the planet. And so you got to do both, though. You got to grow, but you have to do it in a sustainable way. You have to be global, particularly for a brand like ours. We have to be global, but at the end of the day, we have to be local. Have to be extremely relevant locally to the people and connect with them on a local and emotional level. We have to offer choice. And many of you know, the U.S. is fascinated by these mindless reality shows. I watch them myself. That's The Bachelorette. Lots of choice that she has there. But at the end of the day, you have to have simplification. So when I think about our business, yeah, it's great to have 500 brands, 3,000 products, 20,000 SKUs, But at the end of the day, you can get into a world where you've got too much complexity in your business. Simplification is not a bad thing. In fact, simplification and focus can be a great business strategy, in my experience. You have to be great storytellers, because then, I'll talk more about this, more and more marketing, more and more of engaging with people is about telling great stories, compelling stories that the people want to listen to. Not only do they want to listen to it, they think so highly of it, they want to share it. Is the story share-worthy? And I'll show you one. But we also have to do it at scale. Because when you're operating like us in over 200 countries, the last thing you want is everybody in every country doing all their own thing. Then you don't get scale. You descale the business, basically. Very, very critical. We have to be timeless. But at the same time, we have to stay and be relevant. I know this is an audience that knows that. That's Lady Gaga on the right. You have to be both. And but consumers can see through brands that are trying to be what I call faux cool. They're trying too hard to be cool, and that's not necessarily in their DNA. Consumers can see through that very easily. But it's difficult to be both. You have to be relevant and timeless. We have to go after teens because everybody knows that's the future of the world, right? Well, I've got 3 teens at home, and I can tell you they don't have any money, It's more important we have to be adult and go after the adult population. The adult populations in the U.S., Canada, Western Europe, Japan, You know, those are, and as healthcare gets better in Russia particularly in India and in China, in developing countries, you see dramatic increase in the lifespan of people. So you got to have both. You have to have products that address that side too. Not the people on necessarily just on the left who have no money, like my kids. You know, you've got to do both, operating in both worlds. We have to fight obesity, and I will talk specifically about this subject a little later. So all these NGOs and governments are saying, Coke, you're making America fat, you're making this country fat. But the same people in countries come to us and say, the NGOs, you know, the non-governmental organizations come up and say, but Coke, only you have the distribution system to help us solve issues of malnutrition. But so for us, we got to live in both places. Represents, you know, it's the genius of the and, it's also the difficult of the contrast that contrasts the world we live in. We have to be modern and focus on the modern trade, because everybody knew all along that the world was going to consolidate down to one bank, Citibank. Something happened on the way to that. One store, Walmart, probably not going to happen. One airline even, right? Probably not going to happen. So you've got to understand that a lot of our business, our second largest market is Mexico. They don't have elephants in Mexico. It's illustrative. 80% of our business in Mexico goes through small mom and pop stores. Small mom and pops, or those people, that's their entire income, that's their whole life. And as a result, you've got to balance the two. You can't just show all the love to the big modern trade stores and ignore the mom and pops, the traditional trade. You have to be inspirational marketers. That's what Coke has had a history of doing for 127 years. But at the same time, you have to be operational marketers. And that's why I'm not the chief marketing officer at Coke. I'm the chief marketing and commercial officer, because it doesn't do us any good to do great inspirational ads that run in prime time last night, and then you go into a store and you can't find our product, or the packaging is wrong, or the pricing is wrong, or there's no merchandising. You got to have both in order to optimize your investment. So balancing inspirational marketing and operational marketing is really critical for us. You have to have love. It's about brand love and building love. This is a great example of Hollywood love. Hollywood sees value, though, in a different way when they look at those two. They see the cash register. Let me give you a personal example from my giant white golden doodle, Chester. See the I Love Joe button back there. You probably can't see it way back there in row 57. It's like he's at the third deck at the Braves game back there. Chester loves it when I rub his belly or pet him on the head, but what he really values is when I give him that big bone. So it's always balancing the love and the value equation that you have to have when you're in building any business and building any brand. So at the end of the day, for us, it's a challenge of how do you stay familiar but also stay fresh, right? Stay fresh. And unfortunately for us, you know, we're not like Apple. I can't stand up every 3 months and announce the next new sexy product, right? We're not changing the formula. We tried that 25 years ago. It was a little bit of a fiasco. But so what we say is, at least as it relates to the core product, to Coca-Cola, you know, we got to innovate around it. We got to innovate in the packaging, aluminum bottle. We got to innovate in the equipment. I'll show you an example of our freestyle machine. We have to innovate as it relates to consumer engagement. That's some of the most important work that we're doing now. And so you guys, when you're focused on your world, you're facing these same challenges. How do you stay familiar but fresh? How do you stay relevant? I think, and we heard the first speaker talking about the economics in the world and the volatility, and particularly the price of oil. It wasn't necessarily the price of oil that was hurting the airlines, it was the volatility. That's a great message, because what I say is, you know, most companies, most entities, most anything are used to operating in an historic band, what I call an historic band of volatility. The problem is now that band is like this, and it's whipsawing people around. And it's forcing them to say, geez, when it's up this, you say, I'm great, we're great. And when it is, oh, we're terrible, get rid of everybody. So it's having the discipline to stay focused on your strategy that's the key. Because this volatility is here to stay. I'm here to tell you. It is here to stay. And it's going to keep whipping every business all around in huge, huge bands. And managing through that change and staying relevant is a challenge for us. It's a challenge for everybody. And you guys and what you're doing, and I put some pictures here of what things that we did and how we've worked in airports in order to bring some different experience and different branding into airports. And we've been very excited about that, and we want to do that. We see airports and airlines as a very important part of our overall consumer engagement strategy and platform. So I wanted to talk to you briefly today about a few lessons for staying relevant, how great stories matter, and I'll show you an example, how advocacy is really the new sales force, how we need to create an environment around conversations, how we need to think big, start small, but scale fast, and I'll show you what I think is to be a real powerful idea for us, how we need to disrupt or be disrupted, and how I believe fundamentally, and we believe at the Coca-Cola Company, that the future really belongs to the optimists. First of all, great stories matter. As I mentioned earlier, you know, the ability to be a great storyteller is so important now. It really is, because consumers have so much choices. There's so much content. You know, marketing has become a content game. You know, how do you source the content? How do you curate the content? How do you manage the content, and how do you distribute the content? There's a lot of content out there. A lot of it's pretty bad, right? So you got to create compelling stories that people want to listen to and watch. Stories are really the new currency. This is a picture of Allen Ginsberg. Used to stand in Central Park, and people would be enraptured by his stories, his poetry, etc. But that is now the whole world. Now the world, with in a digital world, you got a megaphone to broadcast stories in a very, very different way. The way we think about it is another kind of and. We need to be liquid, in that the story has to be able to flow to all different endpoints, both analog and digital, but it also has to be linked. It has to be grounded in some kind of common belief. It has to be grounded in what the brand stands for. It has to be, and for our case, with Coca-Cola, it's all about a spirit of optimism, positivity, happiness. We think about stories as whether it's the content, whether it's conversations, whether experiences that spread. And this is the 4 types of media. If you remember nothing else from my presentation, remember PESO, P-E-S-O. 4 types of media that we're managing on a regular basis. Paid media, we do a lot of that, it's been billions. Earned media, that which you get through the digital world and the digital space. Shared media, for us it would be sharing, let's say, with what you have in an airport environment or a retailer. And owned media, for us it's massive. Our own media, our trucks, our cans, you know, everything. All that stuff that we owned. So when you're, but the key is, going forward, is to dial down the P and dial up the other 3, quite honestly. Because the P is where the big money is going out to the networks, right? They want money, they want more money. But that's the key, is how do you balance that down and change that dynamic? And you have to try to create value in your stories that transcend that of our own company, that people really see why they should be embracing these things. Let me show you a great story. Turn it up. This is a true story done in Spain, where the oldest man in the country.
Hola, Aitana. Me llamo Josep Mascaró y tengo 102 años. Soy un suertudo. Suerte por haber nacido como tú. Por poder abrazar a mi mujer. Por haber conocido a mis amigos. Por haberme despedido de ellos. Por seguir aquí. Te preguntarás cuál es la razón de venir a conocerte hoy. Es que muchos te dirán que a quién se le ocurre llegar en los tiempos que corren, que hay crisis, que no se puede. Esto te hará fuerte. Yo viví momentos peores que este, pero al final de lo único que te vas a acordar es de las cosas buenas. No te entretengas en tonterías, que las hay, y vete a buscar lo que te haga feliz, que el tiempo corre muy deprisa. He vivido 102 años y te aseguro que lo único que no te va a gustar de la vida es que te va a parecer demasiado corta. Estás aquí para ser feliz.
The beauty of that story, this was at a time in Spain, it still exists actually. 3, 4, 5 years the crisis started. People were very depressed, very high unemployment. Youth unemployment in Spain is over 40%. It's ridiculous. This was our trying to inject into a cultural leadership statement by our brand and say basically, that old man is saying, listen, I've seen a lot. It's a crisis. You'll get out of it. You'll be stronger and come out of it stronger. And, you know, and take an optimistic view of the world. That's what our brand is all about. And I'll show you that a little later, even in spades, as the one that we just launched recently. But great stories can hold people and powerful in that What we want is create stories that are share-worthy, right? That we want you to say, wow, that's really great. I want to share that with somebody because they really would like that. That's the amplifier, the multiplier that particularly the digital space gives you. So it's not just the people just in Spain who see that. It's all over the world they see that now. Second lesson, advocacy is our new sales force. You know, when I started in my whole life, and I would be thinking about, gee, loyalty was at the top of the pyramid, right? No awareness, consideration, preference, loyalty. And I thought, loyalty, that's it, if I can get loyalty. But then I started realizing that in this new world of consumer engagement, the tools were there for advocacy. That advocacy was even higher. That if people can advocate for you and your brand or your company or your airport or whatever, then that becomes a multiplier. And again, that advocate can go both ways. They can be positive and negative. So we've thought a lot about how is advocacy our new sales force. We think about our think about what we call value creators. For our business, you got consumers, people who drink the product. You got customers, merchant retailers, and you've got shoppers. They create value. That's all wrapped around the glue that holds it together is our business system, our employees and our bottlers, which are almost 800,000 people around the world. It's one of the largest business systems in the world. Those are value creators, but what we're learning more and more is there's a whole host of value influencers now that are playing on this. And it's not just stock analysts. It's the NGOs. You know, it's the Greenpeace, the World Wildlife Fund. It's people who are detractors, who say bad things about the company or the brand, people who are advocates. It's the media, it's our agencies, it's governments, it's suppliers, it's people who are, quote, experts. And then, you know, so our view is now we have to be proactively managing these influencers. Proactively managing. They're in a sphere that we haven't historically spent a lot of time with. So your influencers can be anything from the president, so glad that they're drinking Coca-Cola there, to everything from old aging rock stars. There's Keith Richards' long ago photo. Now, here's what I always say is we probably weren't in his #1 choice at this point, but at least we were in his consideration set, right? Getting in Keith's consideration set is not an easy thing. So understanding these influencers and how you manage them is a different world now. It's not just the stock analysts. It's a whole host of people that have to be actively engaged with. When you find and work with people who want to be advocates, they like to participate in things. Culture now, particularly for advocates, and this is particularly true for millennials, teens, etc., it's very participatory. They want to be involved, and they want experiences. They just don't want you to blast messages at them. Let me tell you about something I stumbled on a few years ago. Because I would have people come to me and say, well, Joe, I can't do that program. I don't have enough money. I don't have a big enough budget. And I said, well, let me show you an example. Here's something, here's a phenomena that had over 1 billion transactions in the past 3 years, 263 million people, active monthly users this past December. It was, when this company did a spin-off game, it became #1 in 3 hours. And this was all done by a company with 23 people. Angry Birds. 23 people. So who built Angry Birds? Not the 23 people. The thousands of people who said, I love that game. Share it, right? The buzz that was created. What does that tell you? You don't need huge budgets. And I said, if I got people who can only do marketing with huge budgets and huge in-store promotions, I got the wrong people. I got to get rid of them. And we start that process all the time. We're constantly thinking, guys, you got to be creative. And this is what it is now. These are advocates. This is the multiplier effect of people building your business for you. And it can go the other way too. Oh, that game sucked. I hate it. You know, that can kill you the other way. So you got to but figuring out how to leverage up and getting the advocates is really important. Let me show you a great program.
Your name on a can of Coca-Cola.
Focused on advocacy.
That's what we did on bottles across Australia. Kate, Dave, Jessica, Jake. The top 150 names in Australia printed on our cans and bottles. The campaign generated buzz, and it drove shoppers to retail stores, looking for their name, looking for their friends' names, and when they found it, they Facebooked, tweeted, Instagrammed it, and they got excited. Personalised Coca-Cola, to provoke a little happiness and engage the market.
Those people became advocates for our program. They went to a store. They couldn't find their name, but they found their friend's name, and they quickly, social media was at the heart of this program. When I first saw this, I was scared to death by this one, guys. I said, how are we going to execute this? I can see all this commercial execution risk. But I was proven wrong. This drove substantial reconsideration of the category in our brand in Australia, really significant volume increase. So nice that we decided, you know what, we just rolled this out in Europe. Just rolled it out in a number of markets in Europe, and don't be surprised if it doesn't come to North America at some point in the future also. Very powerful, but it's people are advocating for your brand because they're engaged with the story. Third lesson, create an environment for conversations. You have to create and facilitate that environment. Let me show you this video. Created so much. This is a summary video. Rio. Napoli. Being a matchmaker there. But I think there's a lot of lessons in there. One is obviously some of those immediately got amplified on the web with millions of shares and likes. We used our assets, right, to stimulate conversation. We used and focused on experiential branding. But the big thing is, you know, instead of the cost effective, instead of me spending $1 million to create an ad, we're spending very little money to do those kind of things. And so the whole point is using your assets to help create and facilitate conversations around your brand. I believe fundamentally that experiential marketing, and I think that that represents a huge opportunity in your business, quite honestly, and particularly in the airports to even go even further. The other conversation that has been one that's very sensitive is around obesity, I think the company has struggled with how to engage on this issue. But I said I'm never going to give a presentation again where I'm not talking about this subject because I think that we were allowing our detractors to demonize our company. It is perfectly fine to drink this. There's no problem with drinking Coca-Cola. Now, if you're not a very active person, I wouldn't recommend you drink 10 of these a day. I'd recommend you drink 10 Diet Cokes or Coke Zeros a day. You know, if you're a moderately active person, I probably wouldn't recommend you drink 10 a day. I'd say drink a couple a day, but balance it out. You got to know your own body. It's all about balance in, calories out. The notion that that people can't have personal responsibility for their own is a notion that we're not big fans of. And so obviously you know that while we have enormous respect for Mayor Bloomberg in New York, he decided to try to ban sales of our product in vessels larger than 16 ounces, and we said, come on, this is now when it was going far. And I think that was kind of a tipping point moment for us. We decided, you know, we needed to get in on the debate in a big way, because they started doing ads like this, and it was around, gee, if you're drinking soda, you're pouring on the pounds. And with no discussion at all around, that was all his calories in, no discussion around calories out. No discussion on the fact that people are not nearly as active as they were decades ago. No discussion on the fact that 41% of our Coke trademark sales in North America are 0 or no calories. You know, 0 calories. Does anyone want to hear that? That's the facts. That's the reality. But it is what it is, and I think that we decided to get into the debate and the conversation on this. And so recently, just a month ago, our chairman and CEO, we stood up and we said, we're making these commitments. The commitments around that we're going to offer lower no-calorie beverage options in every market that we operate in. The commitments are we'll provide transparent information, not per on the front of the bottle or the can will be the total calories in that particular package, not per serving. That can confuse people. Here's the total calories. You should know it. We committed to getting our system involved. We already have hundreds, I would tell you, hundreds of active living programs around the world. But in those countries that we don't, we'll dial that up, and we'll also take a lot of our assets, FIFA, World Cup, Olympics, NBA, everything we're involved in, because we're basically involved in everything, and pivot those assets to get people excited about movement and energy. And finally, a marketing responsible policy that particularly says we do not market to any children 12 and under. We do not do that, and that's what we've done. We've had that policy for decades, but we just wanted to reinforce that. So those were our global commitments that we made. Now, this is not a communications issue, but the way you can get people's attention more is through communication. So we started launching with these to get people educated on our product.
I just wanna be okay, be okay, be okay, and I just wanna be okay today. I just wanna be okay, be okay, be okay, and I just wanna be okay today. I just wanna know today, know today, know today. Now then maybe I will be okay.
You can see there at the end we slid in. Listen, if you don't want that one, get a no calorie. The other thing is when we did research and we said how many calories are in that 12-ounce can of Coke, a lot of people were saying 600, 500, 400. It's 140. You got to educate people on that. So a lot of this is education of people. And that's a big part of where we're going with this. But then we also, we've got to also get people to understand that there's some personal responsibility. The world has changed, and people need to take some personal responsibility. So we did this one.
It's not unusual to be loved by anyone. It's not unusual to have fun with anyone. But when I see you hanging about with anyone, it's not unusual to see me cry. I wanna die. It's not unusual to go out at any time. But when I see you out and about, it's such a crime. If you should ever wanna be loved by anyone, it's not unusual, it happens every day, no matter what you say.
So I think where we're gonna go is, we're gonna get after this in a big way. We're gonna get into the cultural conversation on this very sensitive and important societal issue, global issue, the pandemic of obesity. We're going to not only communicate, because it's not just about communications that will motivate people, it's actually having the programs. The programs will be targeted to to get people, particularly people in their, as teens, to get moving, to get active, you know, and to kind of do the things that they need to do to balance the calories in and calories out. So, I won't go into this. So, lesson 4 is around think big, start small, scale fast. You know, really, what we're thinking about is our biggest really competitor is our past and the success that we've had in the past. That's but our biggest challenge currently is our future, is the present, because you know, my experience, having been in a lot of different jobs in a lot of different companies, is that the greatest destroyer of executives and companies is when they start believing their own press clippings and their own, I call it their own BS. You know, once you start believing your own BS as a company, how great you are, or as an executive, how you've done all this, then believe me, that is the beginning of the end. I have seen it over and over. And so we have been very fortunate in the last few years. As I mentioned, the most valuable brand in the world for 13 straight years. We were number 4 on the Fortune Most Admired Company list. I remind everyone, though, that number 1 on list for 2 straight years was a company called Enron. Think about it. Think about it. And, you know, you just got to say, wow, they took a quick fall. So that's why you've got to always stay very humble and very hungry. We were just on the list of the top 15 of the Fast Company most innovative companies. And that innovation was all around our consumer engagement work that we've done. And in a few weeks, actually, I'll have the very difficult task of going to Cannes in the south of France and accepting the award as Coca-Cola as the creative marketer of the year. So that we're very proud of that. Well, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. We're fortunate to have great agencies that help us, and we've got really good people. I just go to meetings, basically, you know, in my life. But when we started thinking about an idea that we could really help in society, we came upon this relationship with a gentleman named Dean Kamen. Now, Dean Kamen is a genius inventor. He invented the Segway. That's the most public thing. But what people don't know about Dean is he also holds about 200 medical patents. A lot of those medical patents relate to micro-dosing technology that people used in how they would be administered doses in a hospital. Sold that for hundreds of millions of dollars to big drug companies. Dean came to us and he said that 60% of all death and disease in the world were related to bad water. And that he had a machine that he was building that when you took one hose and put it in the worst water in the world, a sewer, and runs through his machine, and you take the other hole and put it in a glass, you can drink the water. What I'm calling Dean's Dream Water Machine. And Dean said, I will work with you on your freestyle machine that delivers 106 different flavors if you work with me to help me scale up my water machine. Wow. This has evolved now, and we started thinking, then we made a commitment to install and facilitate 5 million women to become entrepreneurs by the year 2020. Didn't necessarily need to be our business, but we wanted to stimulate female entrepreneurship and get people to have be vibrant members of their community, particularly in a lot of developing countries, particularly in Africa and areas in Asia. And so it expanded then to become something we call Eco Center. And this is the Eco Center. Now, I know you're all really smart, and you can all see Eco is Coke spelled backwards. C-O-K-E. There has to be some marketing to this. But the Eco Center is going to be a place, picture that as a container that you'd get on any kind of ship. And that will then have the water facility. It will have a cell phone charging station. It will have refrigeration. This will be dropped in some of the most difficult places in the world. I think I have a video here to show you on this.
Whatever I choose, and I'll sing the blues if I
So this is really thinking, this for us, this is really thinking big. Start small, because you got to test it out, and we hope to scale fast, because we'd like to have that 500 million liters of fresh, clean water by the end of 2015. So that's a powerful idea, though, that the slingshot is what we ended up branding and call it Dean's water machine. But then we realized there was a bigger business opportunity that would tie into our 5 million female entrepreneurs. If you can set up a woman in a village in Ghana with one of these kind of what I would call entrepreneur in a box, then they can run not only the water, but cell phone chargers, distribution of medicines, refrigeration, etc. That thing, the slingshot machine runs on less power than it takes to operate a hairdryer. And so we think that this is a big idea, and we're going to scale it up as soon as we can. We're getting a lot of support from a lot of NGOs on this who really want to see this move more aggressively. Lesson 5, disrupt or be disrupted. I would tell you that there's nothing that I fear more than disruption in the marketplace by a competitor, irrational behavior, or whatever. This is a machine, I've referenced this before. It's what we call Freestyle. The Freestyle machine has the ability to dispense 106 different flavors and combinations of drinks. It fits very nicely. I would say we're on Gen 1.0 of this. It fits very nicely with consumers who want choice, consumers who want to be engaged. You can picture how this can be social. You can have downloaded your preference in advance. You just go and swipe your cell phone, and boom, there comes your drink. You can just see how this is going to go, the opportunity to engage with people in a social way. We're just at the beginning of where this is all going. Another disruptor was plant bottle. This is a bottle that 30% of this bottle is made from sugarcane waste. 30%, we're trying to get the biology or the physics correct to get it to 100%. It can't go from 30 to 40 to 50, it goes from 30 to 100. This is all the physics around it make it difficult to get there, but we're investing in getting it there. I always say my action standard is you drink the product, you eat the bottle, it tastes like a candy bar, and there's no calories in it. That's where that's where I'd like to take it, actually. But that's a disruptor in the marketplace because, you know, commodity water that's branded, or even commodity water, people say, oh, that's a problem. You're creating all this litter. But if you have something like plant bottle, I think you get a very different. We were delisted out of Walmart with Dasani. Once we got Dasani into plant bottle, Walmart took us back into plant bottle because Walmart's very focused on sustainability. Here's another.
We were inspired by the way
experiential
young
disruption.
Make spaces their own through music.
Our building is a musical instrument programmed with sounds Mark Ronson has been collecting from athletes around the world. As people undertake that spiral journey, they come across 230 individual inflated air cushions with sensors which detect how far you are away from them, a special type of speaker which makes each of these air cushions into a speaker itself.
How they integrated the sound into the structure is truly phenomenal.
I have to take a moment to take it in. Just the complexity of the outside panels, kind of astounding.
Awesome. Really excited!
Absolutely incredible. Phenomenal.
Amazing. Fantastic. Really good.
That's the endorsement from the Queen. But what that was when we went in, this was last year at the Olympics, you know, you get, as an Olympic sponsor, you get a little footprint. And the problem was in London, the park was fairly small, so we had a very small footprint. So we said we needed to do something disruptive, something very iconic, something very different from a design point of view in order to engage people. So the Beatbox was the creation there. And it was a phenomenal success. The actual numbers of people, because remember there was the Olympics and then they have right after that the Paralympics. We had over 300,000 people go through that facility. But the cushions were all designed such that you touch the cushion and it emanated a sound from one of the sports. You know, so this could be ping pong or air archery or whatever the sport, or equestrian. It was all designed and tied to our overall campaign that we called Move to the Beat. It was a disruptive, experiential branding experience for us that we learn all the time. I think for you guys, there's huge opportunities in that space in your own airports. You know, and I think of some of the airports in the U.S. You know, people have lots of time, and big opportunity to disrupt people's traditional view if you can bring in some of this kind of creativity and innovation in this area. So disrupt or be disrupted would be my other lesson. And the last lesson is really the future belongs to the optimist. I think that we fundamentally believe that it's a glass half full world, that we feel our brand, we want to stand for positivity, optimism,
The relationship between India and Pakistan is one that has seen a lot of lows.
It's stressful, it's tense.
It seems it's not improving and it's getting worse.
It's only been 60 years that we have been apart. Before that, we were living harmoniously together.
I think all the strife would go away if you took away the barbed wires in the middle of the two countries.
It saddens me that we have this neighbor that we can't even go visit.
They have this perception which they've been ingrained in their head that that's the bad guy. But when they actually meet them, they realize, you know what, he's just like me.
Mainly because there's no communication. They're near us, but we have no access to them. And it's sad, because together I think we would do wonders.
Creating an environment where young people can exchange ideas, thoughts, gestures, and take away that communication gap that exists.
If I have any opportunity to go to India, I'll surely go there.
The whole idea of actually touching hands, it's like communicating with each other without words, and that action speaks louder than anything else.
This is what we are supposed to do, right? We are going to take minor steps so that we are going to solve bigger issues.
It is more about, how similar we are as opposed to how different we are.
Togetherness, humanity, this is what we want. More and more exchange.
I'm very proud of that one. You take a lot of risk as a company when you insert your brand into very sensitive geopolitical conflicts. I've said that my dream would be, let's place that machine right in the center aisle of Congress, and each machine, one for Republicans, one for Democrats, to see if they can kind of get it together. That's unlikely to happen. But my fundamental view is that's why we believe, and our brand isn't going to solve the India-Pakistan problem, but if we can be just a small part of getting people to see some optimism, some positivity, some happiness, a small part of how they can come together to understand each other better, then that's where we want to be. So fundamentally then, Mr. Joe's lessons for staying relevant, you've seen them. Great storytellers, be storytellers regardless, even in your airport. You can tell wonderful stories. You got to do it in a more dynamic way. Advocacy as your new sales force. Think about the multiplier effect that people will give you. Creating that environment for conversations. Get into that conversation. Don't be afraid of it, even if they are very and highly sensitive. Think big, start small, scale fast. Disrupt or be disrupted, and finally, we believe fundamentally as a company that the future belongs to the optimists. And so all I would say is now, thank you for your attention. Enjoy a Coke, a Diet Coke, a Coke Zero, a Fanta, a Sprite, a Minute Maid, a Simply Orange, but I appreciate your attention, and hopefully, Madam Chairwoman, hopefully that was reasonable for you.
Oh,
all right, thank you.
That was astounding.
I don't know if we have time for any questions.
Yes,
I don't want to disrupt your whole agenda. I've probably gone long already.
Well, we have a few minutes. We still have a few minutes before break. So let's take some questions. We want to thank you first, Joe. We know how busy you are, so we really appreciate that. Michael, yes. Do we have a microphone?
I don't think.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah.
Yes.
So basically, take on detractors. How do you know what was the tipping point there for a while? I guess my question is, sometimes when you take on a detractor, you give more attention to the detractor
Yeah.
argument that you couldn't have.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I think that was a very, I think there was a lot of internal angst over that. How much did we want to go after that? I think that was the tipping point, because when we saw legislation or regulation that was basically that was going to effectively ban our product at a certain size, we thought that that had gone too far. And you know, we believe in education and choice versus taxation, regulation, and that whole space. And so I think that that was kind of I would say in a strange way, the Blair Bloomberg action kind of energized us and kind of got us really to say, wait a minute, we need to be part of this conversation. Now, and there's two parts of it. There's the one part that says, wait a minute, let's fight that. We don't agree with you, Mr. Mayor. We respect you, but we don't agree with you on this issue. And the other part then we said was, listen, we need to be help be part of the solution on the obesity issue. So we can't stand on the sidelines, particularly as the largest brand in the world, particularly given the nature of our company. We need to say we needed to join the conversation in a more aggressive and proactive way, and that's what we've done. And particularly it kind of culminated in these commitments. It's hard culturally for big companies to do those things, but I think that it absolutely was the right thing for us to do. And this isn't a campaign, because this is the kind of thing that's never going to end. You got to be there doing it all the time. But you know, we'll fight the detractors. But we'll also spend more, and I want to spend more time and energy and resources on educating people on the issue, giving them the choice, making the availability, creating programs that will get people to be active you know, with sports in the community. That's what we want to spend our time. It's a great question. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Relative to your distribution,
Yes.
your customer relationships.
Yes.
It seems in airports, amusement parks, train stations, all sorts of pouring rights deals are becoming
Yes.
very big.
Yes.
How is Coke approaching that? Are you in an effort to get them all or get the important ones? What's your focus on that?
Well, I would say that we have fundamentally a ubiquity strategy, but I would say a ubiquity strategy can be very expensive. And so sometimes you get irrational environments where people are looking for more than they you know, really can, the value that we can extract from it. So I think we're trying to think of it more broadly and how we can work with people on from more of a shared value perspective. You know, shared value is different than just transactional value. And if you work with people and partners that believe in a shared value framework, if it's all about just the transaction, we get it. And there will be properties and entities that are just about the transaction. If it wants to be a little bit broader, then we have the resources, the assets, and the marketing machine and muscle to be able to work on both sides. So it can work both ways. It depends on what the frame of reference is for the asset. But you're right. In some instances, the rights on those pouring rights have gone to irrational levels in some instances, and that troubles us. But it is what it is. These things tend to go in circles.
I love your marketing pieces that show real, genuine human reactions
Yes.
to situations. But as a PR marketing person, I think practically, and I think, how did they get photo releases from all of those people and permission to use them in a marketing piece? And doesn't that kill the spontaneity?
Well, this is part of it's a great question. It's something that I say, I'll take the risk, go ahead, let them sue me. Because in many instances, the New World Order, you know, what I talk about is when you're going to get in an environment now where you need lots of content, much faster, very iterative, I don't have the time anymore. We don't have the time to be sitting and the lawyer will approve the copy or the response to that consumer in 3 weeks. The world where a consumer tweets, posts something that says your brand is evil, you're destroying X and Y, you're doing these bad things, on Friday afternoon at 5:30, and the company and brand responds on Monday morning at 9, that is over. You know, you can have your whole business destroyed over the weekend. So we have had to evolve our business system to get everyone comfortable in taking more risk and in just getting into the conversation more. And if that means that sometimes we don't cover off everyone in there, so be it. I'm always pushing the team to take more risk. And I said, there's probably very little you'll do individually to bring down the company. I'll take the risk.
Joe, incredible conversation. I'm Carolyn Pinnell from Orlando International.
Yes.
When you talk about your brand and that it existed, your logo has existed, how do you defend when you get comments of, we need to make it more contemporary, how do you defend that movement that says, that's old-fashioned, that's done, we need to do something new?
Yeah.
And I know there have been a couple of attempts, but you go back to your traditional. How do you
I think that's a great question. It's always, it's that balancing the familiar with the fresh. And I think that we tend to do it, the script on Coke, that's sacrosanct, but a great example has been what we've done in the US on Diet Coke, where we had Diet Coke in kind of a script, but then we went to the cropped logo on the Diet Coke, particularly on the can. A cropped logo. And when I first said, oh my God, it's going to just, no, we wanted it to be a little bit more contemporary, more of a fashion brand. And so I think that my experience is you can't be too prissy with your logo and be so think that, all of a sudden doing these little things that are going to destroy it. And so you have to be prepared to take some, what I would consider to be prudent risks with it. Now, I'll take a lot more risk on Fanta or Sprite than I will on Coca-Cola, You just got to understand and gauge that. I would say it's fairly situational, and it's really a question of, you want to have what we have as a concept and a philosophy called freedom within a framework. So we want people to innovate, but within a framework. And if you give people, particularly marketers, if you give them the whole canvas to paint, then you get some really crazy stuff. But if you say, you know what, you can take about 2/3 of that canvas, but this part of the canvas, you cannot touch that, then that's it. Freedom within a framework. Yes?
I'm most familiar with my employer with the business model of at my employer, we're asked to triage tasks by should do, must do, should do, nice to do.
Sure.
And what I'm seeing in your model is there are tasks which you might think are nice to do that are at your must-do list. These are tasks that seem to have peripheral marketing value, but mostly speak to a higher purpose.
Yes.
How do you get those tasks from in the nice-to-do thinking to the must-do?
That's a great question. And I think that what you have to do is, if you don't have an underlying philosophy in your company, that you have a balanced scorecard view. If your only view of your company is as a profit machine, then you won't take the time to do the eco-center. And so last year I was at a Goldman Sachs analyst conference, and these are just hardened analysts, and all they care about is what is the EPS. And I said, well, let me tell you about the new EPS. You guys are thinking of EPS as earnings per share. Let me tell you how I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking of E as economic value, P as partner value, and S as social value. And the new Enlighten Corporation will be managing that new EPS as opposed to just the EPS of share. Everything's got to be about shareholder value. That's not the world we're living in. Everything we see, all the trends we see, all the engagement is you've got to have a shared value view of the world that says, now, I always say the other thing is, a principle is not a principle unless there's a cost involved, right? I can stand on the soapbox here from the mountaintop and say, we're going to be water neutral by 2015, but if I'm not prepared to spend the resources to do that, it means nothing. And in the new world order of consumer engagement, people have transparency into that, and they'll be ruthless, and they'll say, look at your greenwashing, you're doing that. So I think it just becomes a question of you've got to make it a priority, and you've got to put it in everyone's business objectives. And that's what we have done. We have said not only is the winner of we give an award every year called the Woodruff Cup, where the winner is the business unit or the country in the world that does the best performance. Part of their performance is related to what did you do for sustainability in that country? Did you meet your measures against that? So what did you do on hiring, particularly on female hiring or minority or diversity hiring? What are you doing? Are you making those goals? Because if you're not, then it's just like pontificating in nothingness. So you have to measure it. What gets measured gets done. So it becomes a priority for us. That is a priority.
Are you going to put sugar in American Coke?
There is. It's corn syrup. It's sugar. It's all the same. But I hear you. I know what you're saying. The illusion that the Mexican Coke is better.
I'm brand specifically.
All right. Thank you. I need that volume.
Tom, if we can take one more
question.
That's been
There's somebody
to get
way in the back there in the last row. They must not have had a good view of the film.
Hi, my name is Demetria Weidman. I'm the marketing manager here at Hartsfield-Jackson. This is the age-old marketing question that I think a lot of us are faced with on a daily basis, which is ROI. Especially, when you're moving to tactics that are much more experiential and harder to track.
Sure.
How do you answer that question to the higher ups when they're telling you, this is all great, but what are we going to get from
Yeah,
it?
that's a great question. I would say I answer it the following way, and that is if you're looking to isolate what your Twitter advertising buy did or your Facebook ad buy did, you're going to spend a lot of time chasing that down because you're never going to find it. Unless it's a direct promotional kind of offer. What we find is that my experience in many companies and many businesses is that the company that does the full surround sound of consumer engagement at all the endpoints, all the touch points, is the one that delivers the greatest ROI. And trying to isolate and determine which is the value of that media buy on a social platform is really, it's quite a ways away. I do think that from a digital perspective, that will be able to be measured more and more than more of our traditional world has been measured historically, because you'll be able to draw that direct line of sight. The measurement systems are not in place yet to do that, but it is coming. But fundamentally, there's a little leap of faith here, but you've got to be where the eyeballs are. That's the strategy. And if the eyeballs are there, and if you've got compelling content to seduce them in and engage them with your brand over time. Plus, you're going to drive yourself crazy trying to measure weekly performance based on those campaigns. You got to think about it from a long-term brand building perspective. And it's got to create brand value and brand love. Okay, well listen, I appreciate the time. Hopefully this made some sense. It was very good questions. I thank you. Thank you.